Welcome to another episode of the Success Story Podcast. I have Erin Blaskie, who is currently a fractional CMO. She is scaling her own business in a big way. It wasn't always like that though. She has done entrepreneurship. She has pivoted and started working for somebody again, scaling SaaS companies, and then she went back into entrepreneurship. We're going to break down her career story. She is a name in marketing. She's had her thoughts, opinions, ideas. They've been featured in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur, Globe and Mail, to name a few. She is a marketing professor at the Telfer School of Business in my hometown, Ottawa, and she also sits on an entrepreneurial council as an advisor at Algonquin College. She has some great branding, entrepreneurial, and just general life lessons to share with people that are looking to build their own thing or are entrepreneurs within a company. We also have two incredible sponsors for today's episode. So for CFOs, entrepreneurs, we have Gusto. They have a special offer for everybody who's listening. If you've never heard of them, they are payroll solutions. This is going to make your life easier. And then our second sponsor is Storyworth. They have a special offer set up for everybody who's shopping for Mother's Day. So please stick around till around the halfway point. You're going to get both of these offers exclusive to Success Story Podcast listeners. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get right into it. Thanks again for joining me. Today, I'm sitting down with Erin Blaskie. Erin is a fractional CMO. She is a startup and scale-up marketing consultant. She's an advisor. She is a TedX speaker. She is a digital marketing instructor. She's been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Adweek, and Wall Street Journal. I'm really happy to bring her on. She's had an incredible career. She's gone back and forth between entrepreneurship and working for incredible companies. And, you know, Erin, thank you for coming on, and I'm excited to sort of unpack your story, but I'm also excited because like when I'm speaking to you now, so today is what, like we're Friday, March 26th. This is like a very important point in your career because you had some big changes recently, and I want to dive into those as well. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'm super stoked to have this conversation, and we're talking about all my favorite things. So it's a good day.
Good. It's a good Friday. Okay. So, let's cue it up for everybody who's listening. Let's just walk through your career, where you came from.
Yeah.
I just read off the stuff that you have on your LinkedIn, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you've achieved over your career. So, walk us through it.
Yeah. So every time I do this, I always scare people because I say, like, we have to go all the way back to 1986, which people are usually like, whoa, we don't need that much detail. However, what I will say about, going back that far is really like my love of technology, my love of this idea of business and everything. It came really early on in my life. And around 86, my dad brought home a Commodore 64, which for anyone listening that doesn't know what that is, it's a computer. I actually have one in my office on a shelf right above here, right above me. But anyway, he brought home this computer, and I just remember, I grew up in a very small town. It was a very like blue collar town, didn't have a lot growing up. But when this computer came home, I was amazed. I was so impressed, with it. And I remember we set it up, and my dad was like, yeah, just go ahead, like play with it. And my sister and I, we would set up like an office in our house. And of course, I was the older one, so I was always the CEO, and she was my secretary every time. And I would just like play Office. And I remember, I didn't have examples of it. I didn't have like anyone in my own personal life or even in our community really that had this like, lifestyle. But for some reason, I was just obsessed with it. And that sort of continued on. And I remember like even as I was growing up, I was very entrepreneurial. I used to like go and pick out like rocks and bark out of the forest and then go sell them to the cottagers nearby. They bought it, probably because I was like this little like, cute kid and they couldn't resist. Yeah. But yeah, this like trend sort of continued through my whole life. And, it showed up in high school, it showed up in college. And when I got to, I went to school and I left school, I tried to get out of school as fast as possible because I just wanted to work. So I left, finished school, and then ended up working in a company and realized like really quickly that I just didn't love being boxed in, to one specific role and really just like, kind of being limited by what I could do. And so at the age of 21, I decided to launch my first company. And so I launched at that time a virtual assistance business. And this was 2004. It was like pre-social media, the internet as we know it today. And I got really lucky in some ways because my very first client in that company happened to be a startup founder in Silicon Valley. I did not know what Silicon Valley was, okay? Like I was, like I said, small town girl in the Ottawa Valley in Canada, and here I am working with this company, and this company and this founder were doing such incredible things. Like they were leveraging the internet to market their product, and they were, pulling at the time was a lot, 5 figures a month, and then they grew to 6 figures a month. And I just remember experiencing all of that, thinking like, this is incredible. Like I love this. And my eyes, of course, like growing up with nothing, when all of a sudden you're seeing all of these dollar signs on the internet, you're like, whoo, okay, I want to do this too. So I started like really cracking the code of, what does it mean to market on the internet? What does it mean to create passive revenue sources? Like what kind of businesses can be built? And of course, jumping on things like social media and all of these different platforms as they were coming out. And over the next like 14 years, which is a hard bucket to sort of capture, I really spent that time working with about 300 different businesses, again, over like the 14-year period, doing all kinds of crazy things, like mostly marketing related. But I was working on personal brands for, Hollywood actors and professional athletes, best-selling authors. I was also doing, work with Disney and Kraft and Travelocity and different, bigger brands, and just absorbing everything. Like I was a sponge, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about marketing. And so I did that for 14 years before starting to consult
All
locally.
entrepreneur, by the way?
Yeah.
Was this still all entrepreneur? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that was all just like me figuring it out, made a lot of mistakes, a lot.
Yeah, everyone does though. So that's good. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and really grew that business to, for me in my 20s, like I grew it to about $250,000 a year in sales, with literally spending no money on advertising or marketing, just doing it all myself and building, a referral network and that kind of thing. And then I started consulting locally in 2017 with a startup accelerator. And then I fell in love with like their business model and the company and the team, and decided to close up shop and join them full time. So did that for a couple years. Then I joined a B2B SaaS company called Fellow, and then was there for a year. Really helped them build out a lot of their marketing foundations and start to get ready to scale. And then at the beginning of this year, I quit. I quit my job with
that's when we
nothing
first
lined up.
started talking, right? That's I think you were like, when we first were trying to queue up this podcast, I think you were like, you were quitting, or you like quit like the day before,
I
and you're like,
just
Scott,
quit.
like chill. Yeah. Like I gotta get my shit together, and then we'll do it in a couple of weeks. So now you've had some time. We were just talking about some of the successes you've had. So we'll talk about where you're at now. But let's dive into some of the history, because the history definitely cues up like what you're working on. So non-linear career path is one of the things that you've definitely lived.
Yeah.
Why did you, let's just figure out why, after making 250K, did you ever want to work with somebody, 250K, in your own business? Why would you work for somebody again? What were the benefits? What were the lessons learned? Was it difficult? Let's talk about just pivoting, because I think people think the opposite of what you do, right? They want to escape the 9 to 5. They want to escape the company, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like when people start businesses, and like if they at all have this vision in mind that they're escaping a 9 to 5, I mean, like park that. That is just absolutely 1000% not true. In fact, you're going to work more than the 9 to 5 if you start your own thing. And a lot of what you do, you're not getting paid for, so you have to do a lot of the business calls and the accounting and the bookkeeping. And even if you're not, like, even if you outsource that stuff, you still have to facilitate it and organize it. And, so there's a lot of stuff that you do when you're self-employed that you're just not getting paid for. And you don't get the luxury all the time of just closing up the laptop at the end of the day and then, not looking at it again until you go back. So for me personally, what ended up kind of happening for me is that in about 2015, 2015, somewhere in there, I ended up hitting a pretty significant wall of burnout. And that burnout led to, like, I've always been predisposed to depression my whole life. Like, I've dealt with it from the time I was probably 14. But I really was like impacted greatly inside of my business. I was at the same, I was going through a divorce. I was like, kind of managing a lot of different things, obviously learning how to be a single parent, starting to figure out like, how am I going to sustain this business and this, raise my daughter and also do this all on my own. And there was just a lot going on. And then at the same time, I had a subcontractor that we were working on a lot of web development projects. He ended up bailing on me out of the blue, which is the complete risk you run when you don't have employees and you have freelancers and subcontractors. And it was kind of like everything came to a head for me. And I just realized how trapped I felt. Like I had this enormous amount of, burnout, and I really couldn't function. And, but at the same time, I had no choice, and I think it was in that moment that I really had to look at, everything in my life. Like, what was I doing? How had I structured this business? Was this actually set up in a way that could sustain my life and could sustain the ups and downs? And the answer was no. The answer is absolutely, it was not set up that way. So I spent the next year after that, after I actually came out of that burnout and that depression and, worked really hard to get through that. I spent the next year restructuring everything and really like evaluating what was important to me. And when I started consulting with Allspark, the accelerator, I honestly, in that moment, I love the team there. Like, I still do. They're still amazing. And I loved what they were doing. It was very similar to what I was doing, but inside of four walls, right? And there was like team support, and there was people, and the founders were all in there, and it was a co-working space. So it was dynamic and interesting. And I had spent 14 years working by myself in a home office, just like this. And so for me, it was like, because I had had that experience and began evaluating like what was important, it just fit, and the moment was just right for me. And it checked a lot of the kind of the boxes that I was after. So I decided, I'm very much a gut person. Like, I will listen to my gut all the time. And for me, it was just like, this is right. And so when they sat me down over lunch and asked me one day, like, hey, would you ever consider coming on board full time? I didn't hesitate. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I don't care what it looks like. Let's do it. And then I closed up shop essentially and took a job. So for me, it was right in the moment. It was the perfect job in terms of like what I needed at that time, the community involvement, the level of, just like deep appreciation that the team had for each other was exactly what my heart and soul kind of needed. And yeah. And then, I mean, of course we can talk about like any lessons learned going into like the next kind of phase of like next full-time company. But that was just like the perfect thing, that my soul needed at the time.
I do want to unpack some of those lessons. I just want to highlight something that resonated with me from that. And it's something that I see hurting a lot of people in their career or entrepreneurs. And it's that they feel like pivoting into something else. It could be in their own business, or going from entrepreneurship back to working for somebody, or even if they are in a role and they feel like they're burning out in that role in a company, there seems to be this stigma against changing or taking care of yourself or doing something that perhaps to some people may be less impressive or less, and I'm not saying what you did was less impressive, but for example, if you're in a role that's burning out, I use this example a lot, and say you're a VP level or a director level at a startup and it's not going well and you just hate every single day, and you don't want to take a role at a larger company that perhaps could be a better suited role, you'd have more resources, more support because it's a different job title or something like that. Like, just you're afraid of changing because of what people will think of you, I don't know. It just seems like that's something that we should champion more and make okay more, because there is no right way to do life or do a career or do entrepreneurship. And we
No.
we think that like, oh, if you've achieved this certain status level, that's where we have to stay or up or bust, right?
Hmm.
And you've proven you're living proof that you can pivot and do different things and take a step back and refresh and then look at where you're at now, which is a much
Yeah.
better version, a much better iteration of where you were, I guess 2, 3 years ago. So just something to take a note of because I don't think it's talked about enough. That
Yeah, I
taking a step
completely
back, 2 steps
agree.
forward. Hey, it's Scott here. I just want to pause for a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, Storyworth. What an innovative concept, right in time for Mother's Day. Stay with me on this one. This is one of the coolest things I've ever found, and I'm extremely excited to be giving this to my mother for Mother's Day as well. Let me walk you through what Storyworth is. Storyworth is an online service. It helps your mother, aunt, grandmother, any mother figure in your life collect stories through thought-provoking questions about their memories and their personal experiences. It's an incredible way to engage with your loved ones, especially if you can't be physically with them, which is obviously the case this year. And if there's ever been one year to go the extra mile to make your mothers, and to be honest, anybody in your family, feel the love, it's this year because people are struggling. I'm personally honoring my mother with Storyworth, but I'm going to walk you through their process so you understand exactly how it works. So let's say you're going to be giving this to your mom. Every week, Storyworth will email your mom with a prompt, a question that you may have never thought to ask. An example may be, what is the best advice your mother ever gave you? After a year of these weekly questions, Storyworth will combine all of these insightful answers into it will ship for free for you, for your mother, for your family. It's a beautiful keepsake. This is a beautiful idea because when our loved ones are alive and around, we don't cherish them and we don't ask them these questions and we don't get these memories eternalized from them until they're gone and it's too late. This is something that allows us to do that. So Storyworth, for everybody who's listening to the Success Story podcast right now, has set up a special link. So go to storyworth.com/success story. That's storyworth.com/success story. You're going to get $10 off your next purchase, which falls right in line for Mother's Day. You can use it for other people, but it falls right in line for Mother's Day. This collection of thoughts, beautifully bound in a book and a keepsake, is going to be one of the nicest things you can give yourself, your family, and also your mother so that she can pass on some things that she wants to tell you that perhaps you never even thought about mentioning. A wonderful offer. Go to storyworth.com/success story. Use it for Mother's Day. Use it for someone else. But this is a truly meaningful present. Anyways, let's get back to the
And
Yeah.
honestly, I think like one of the best things I think I've ever done in my life is completely ditch societal success, meaning like, you
Mhm.
know, the typical version of what success looks like in society. I've taken that and like literally thrown it out. Because for some that's very motivating and it's very, it's very aspirational to drive towards all of the things we think are successful. And to your point, a lot of those things are upward trajectories, right?
Mhm.
It's like you got to earn more, you have to have the bigger title, you have to have the bigger house and the better car, and like none of that has mattered to me for over a decade. And I think that has literally been, I think, the biggest driving kind of force for me to be able to make these decisions is I really don't care what anyone else thinks. I know people say that. I actually don't care what anyone else thinks of like my career and like what my choices are, because at the end of the day, I'm making them based on, fulfilling the needs that I have. And I was just actually talking to someone this morning, and we were talking about goals and like setting goals for your life. And I was saying like I'm in this weird spot right now because I actually feel so content with my life and like what I have. And I'm so grateful for what I have that I actually don't have a lot of like those traditional goals that people have. Like I'm not striving for, $1 million business. I'm not like trying to have the BMW in the driveway. Like I've had those things and they literally made my life 0% better. Like, you know, they didn't, because like at the end of the day, I wasn't listening to like what was actually in my heart in terms of like what would make me feel truly successful. And what I've realized is, for me personally, again, this is a very personal thing. For me personally, it's like I just want to be financially secure. Like I want to be able to pay my bills without worrying about it. I want to be able to buy myself something every once in a while. I want to have free time though. Like I want to be able to get out and hike and kayak and, do the outdoor adventure stuff I love. I want to have time to spend with my daughter. She's 10 now and she's at this beautiful age where she's like cool to hang out with, like we
Yeah.
can hang out and do stuff. And like, as long as I have those things and I have like a house over my head and food on the table, I'm good. Like I'm actually good. And I don't really want for anything, which, is kind of, it's a great place to arrive at, but it takes
Hmm.
really throwing out the comparison, game that you might do with other people, or any of that. Like I don't have any of that anymore.
And how did you arrive at that? Was it the burnout? And just a two-part question. I hate doing
Yeah.
these, but it's important that I add
Hmm.
on. How would you recommend somebody try and come to peace with what they have
Hmm.
without having to go as far as you did?
Yeah, that's a great. I actually really like how you phrased that question, because I don't
Yeah.
recommend that anyone
Yeah.
do it the way that I did it. I actually did a lot of therapy. Like I've done a lot of personal work on myself with the help of professionals. Like I've done, psychotherapy. I've done like a lot of different things that were very helpful to allow me to really start to unpack like what was important. And I've also done a lot of like work on my own. Like I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly learning about other people's experiences. And I feel like the more that I expose myself to the experiences of others and like the experiences in the world, it's very easy when you do that to then have a lot of gratitude for what you
Hmm.
have, because you realize that this isn't like the norm, right? And I honestly do attribute a lot to my humble beginnings. Like I didn't grow up with a lot. In fact, like at times we were, very poor. And that humbles you, in a way, because I don't take anything I have for granted, or at least I try really hard not to. And so I think if folks are kind of struggling with it, I think, realizing that stuff in your life is not going to fill the void that you might have, and
Hmm.
chasing things, it won't necessarily bring you ultimate happiness. I think you is really doing some, introspection on that, trying to figure out like what do you really want in life if you actually put aside a lot of those materialistic things. And that's not to say, by the way, that I judge anyone if they have like more materialistic goals. Like that's again, it's a very personal thing, and that can be completely motivating for some people. But I do think that there's some value in doing the work, that's required. And honestly, there's no real shortcut to it. I think you have to just do the work. But honestly, therapy is great. On like
Well, yeah.
totally great.
No, I was
Yeah.
gonna say it's. By the way, you mentioned some point about not, if people have material goals, it's fine. But I do believe that there are far more people that speak about the hustle culture, the achieving material wealth through perhaps entrepreneurship or otherwise. There's too many people weighted on that side of the discussion and not enough people weighted on the side of the discussion that or their lens that you're sort of looking at entrepreneurship and life and success through, which is
Yeah.
you can be successful, you can achieve, but understand what that success comes with as
Hmm.
well, right?
Yeah, and I've also
So
seen those
yeah.
founders succeed and get, the $1 million plus exits. I've seen them, get on the other side of that, and they're miserable because like they don't know what to do with themselves, and they're not
Yeah.
fulfilled. And I think if you don't do the work to figure out like what does success actually look like for you beyond those materialistic things, you're going to arrive at those moments and you're still going to be unhappy,
Hmm.
and for me, like that's why I spend a lot of time really asking myself, what do I want this to feel like? Like, what do I want my life to feel like? And as long as it feels right and the work I'm doing feels fulfilling, and I have that security that I'm sort of makes me feel very comfortable. The rest of it, like, yeah, for me personally, again, it's a very personal
Hmm.
thing, but it just doesn't really matter.
Okay, so I want to we've spoken about a few things that I was actually going to ask you, but you kind of just
Yeah.
like gone into these topics anyway, so it's good. Any other lessons that you've learned coming in and out of entrepreneurship that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, yeah. So in this, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, so I talked about obviously like landing at the accelerator and
Hmm.
that role being like exactly what I needed at that time, right? Like it was like soul fulfilling in so many ways. And then I want to also talk about when it's not right, because I think that's equally as important. Because I think as an entrepreneur who may be going back and forth, or even if you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of thinking like, oh man, the grass looks greener on that side, knowing that it doesn't always work out the way that you think it's going to. And so for me, when I ended up going from the accelerator, which again was a very like relationship heavy community role, I was surrounded by people. I was very engaged with a lot of different founders. I was not only working on the brand of the accelerator, but I was also working as an embedded advisor for the startups. So it was a very dynamic and interesting, but people focused role, and that's key because what I'm about to say is a shift. And so when I went to Fellow, which is like a SaaS company, I was so excited about that role. I was so excited about taking on that work. But what I didn't realize, and you don't know these things until you get in them, to be honest. What I didn't realize was just that being in a role that is actually not people focused, that doesn't have that community element, that doesn't have that dynamic nature. It's not that the role wasn't dynamic. I mean, I was doing so many different things and working on very cool projects, and I had an amazing team, and the company's great, the software is great, I still use it today. Like, there was nothing about the actual like company that was bad or anything like that, but it was just that I realized in the role that I was like dying on a vine a little, like, meaning I didn't have
Hmm.
that like ability to connect with humans every day and have this like really dynamic heart feeling thing. It was like analytics and landing pages and copy, and those things are great. It's part of marketing, but for me it was just like I realized like, wow, I actually need a lot of that human kind of centric work to feel like I'm doing my best work. And I need that community involvement, which I had so much of at LSpark and then had none of at Fellow. And so, again, there's no part of Fellow that is responsible for that. It was literally just like a fit in terms of the role itself. And so,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to kind of ask myself as I went into 2021, like, is that what I really want, for my career and my future? Or do I need to like make a hard decision now, to sort of get back closer to the type of work that I love to do? So I think sometimes it also, you can get into a place where you also have to be real with yourself. And again, like to your point earlier, it's not about like failure. It's not about like, oh my gosh, I failed at this. It's literally about like identifying, okay, it's going well. We're achieving a lot, all of our numbers are up and to the right. Like, this is good. But at the end of the day, like, does it feel right? And
Hmm.
I think sometimes a lesson that I've learned over the years as well is that you just have to listen, and you have to be willing, to like zag when you think you should be going a different way. And
Yeah.
and I think that was that was another big lesson for me, is like sometimes it's not going to be right. Sometimes you're going to get it wrong.
So,
Yeah.
all that I'm hearing out of this is throughout your career, what's really contributed to your success and your happiness is this incredible heightened sense of self-awareness,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I think is important. I think it's
Yeah.
very important
Yes.
because that's what led your decisions, and that's what's led. And now I'm gonna ask what you're doing now and how it's changed from what you
Hmm.
did in the past. But I think it's all driven by self-awareness, and
Yeah.
that's something people need to work on.
I love that you've said that. I think honestly that's one of the greatest things that you can work on, building in yourself, is definitely self-awareness. It's always helped me no matter what, like whether it's, been in parenting or work or in life and relationships. Self-awareness is so key. It's not easy. because I mean, it's led to me like getting a divorce. It led to me quitting my business. It led to me quitting jobs. Like, it's not easy to have self-awareness. And sometimes it is hard for people to understand your decisions, especially if they think, you should be doing things a certain way. But at the end of the day, it really has allowed me to get to a place where I do feel today happier than I've ever felt, which is, I'm so grateful that I was able to get there. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about a fellowship, good company, doing all the right things, but it wasn't your vibe.
Yeah.
So what is your vibe? What prompted you to take the next steps, and how do you make this iteration of entrepreneurship of the next level in your life? How do you make it better than what it was before? Hey, Scott here. We're just going to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, Gusto. This is a one-stop shop, one place you can go to take care of all the payroll issues, all the payroll stresses that you have to deal with as a business owner. Look, 2020 has been a rough year. We can all agree on that, and 2021 is pretty rough too. But if there's one thing that small business owners don't need is more headache. One thing that you've learned in the past year is that you have to focus on your business, because Gusto isn't just built with businesses in mind, it's built with the people who run businesses in mind. Their payroll system is the easiest to use, and I've used a lot over my career. Gusto automatically calculates paychecks, it files all of your payroll taxes, it also helps with time tracking, health insurance, and a ton of other HR nightmares that you just don't want to deal with. It also gives you access to HR experts who can help you. It's super easy to get started and set up. The switching pains are nil. Why? Because they will move over all of your data for you. 94% of customers who switch to Gusto recommend Gusto as the best payroll solution they've ever used. And this is the offer you're waiting for. Anybody who's listening right now on the Success Story podcast, you get 3 months free. This means you can try it without any stress. Go to gusto.com/Scott. That's gusto.com/Scott, and that will give you 3 months free to try it out for yourself. Play around with it, see if it works for your business. I'm almost positive it will. All right, let's get back.
Yeah, great questions. So in a lot of ways, when I quit my job at Fellow, I actually had no idea what I was going to do.
Fellow, my bad. I called a fellowship. I'm sorry. I meant.
Oh, no, it's okay. So when I quit there, I honestly had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I was okay, I feel like I've done a lot. I feel like I'm going to end on a high note, we'll go out when it's still really, really great. And, but I just I quit. And then, I put on LinkedIn, hey, I quit, open to conversations, let's see what comes up. And the next 3 weeks I had 70 plus phone calls. It was honestly overwhelming in so many ways. And just there were so many things. There were full-time offers. There were, contracts being put in front of me. There was the potential to join some companies as their CEO and others as their COO, and just all of these different things. And I had to really sit and assess what do I want? Because this is a lot. You would think that that's a great position to be in, and it is. I'm so grateful that I have a network that was willing to step up and support me like that. But it's also very hard to have that much choice. And I was afraid of making the wrong decision. But, again, I went back to that same thing where I just checked in with myself and thought okay, what do I really want? And for me, it needed to be a couple things. I knew I needed a role that was people, community, dynamic, doing different things. I love working with startups and scale-ups a lot. I love the beginning phases of marketing in a business. I love building foundations around marketing. And so I just sort of allowed myself to kind of gravitate towards some of those things. And the other thing I did very differently this time was I actually priced my services appropriately this time. I didn't undervalue myself or what I do. And I also knew that I needed to price myself at a certain point if I also didn't want to have to fill a full 40 or 50 hours of work a week. I wanted to maybe fill 20, and then have the other 20 to do things like this, podcasts and mentor and coach and, work with accelerators or whatever the case might be. And so it really was about like, okay, I need things that are aligned with like those, that have the elements of what I love. So foundations, startups, community, people, that kind of thing. But it also needs to be companies that are willing to invest in marketing and understand the value of it. So that they know that when they're investing in me, that what we're going to do together is actually going to exponentially change their business, but they have to have that knowledge, because otherwise you end up in a place where they're investing, but there's a lot of fear or maybe like hesitation that can come along, and then that just makes things muddy and not so great. But yeah, so it's just about picking like really great clients, doing work I love, and then just being open to whatever kind of comes up. Yeah.
And what I guess, you've learned lessons in entrepreneurship. You mentioned things about pricing yourself and valuing yourself and sort of protecting your time and looking for the right, like the right target client so that you don't waste your time.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that you've done differently, or you would suggest somebody sort of keep top of mind if they're going into entrepreneurship or starting their own thing, almost like as a service-based or a consultant-based business for the first time?
Yeah, outsource the stuff that is like business operational right away. I mean, a lot of people, even myself in my first business, I waited probably 7 years before I actually, hired an accountant as an example, or got a lawyer to look over my contracts. Like I was doing all of that in business one. I was doing all of that on my own. And the reason I did is I didn't have the mentality yet of like, I should invest in my business in these areas, because if I do, I'm actually going to be able to like spend that time making money versus, sort of doing it on unbillable. But I was, I just didn't have that mindset back then. This time around, the very first thing I did instantly was I emailed my lawyer and I was like, hey, we need to set up a corporation. Let's go. And then I emailed my accountant, that I used before. And I said like, hey, look at me. I'm actually engaging with you on day one. I'm so proud of myself. And I got him on board like immediately. And I said, listen, I don't want to have to think about a single aspect of this, like the accounting side of the business. I don't want to have to know when I need to file HST. I don't want to have to like do that. I want you to just take care of all of it. I'm going to build it into my rates. I know it's a hard cost, and it's a cost I'm willing to spend money on. So I think the thing I've learned this, like especially, and I'm doing a lot differently this time, is just putting those systems in place from day one, so that I'm not having to later transition that over, or end up. This is what happened last time, is I ended up with a $45,000 bill from the CRA that was very unexpected. And
nice.
thankfully,
Okay.
thankfully
you only need one of those, right?
Yeah, thankfully it turned out okay. It was like just an error, but even still, getting those bills in the mail are not fun. And I didn't have an accountant then. And, it was just one of those things where it ended up like derailing a few weeks of my life. And I just don't want to have any of that slow me down this time, or get in the way of like my happiness. So outsource as much of those things right away as you can, even if it does feel like a cost. It honestly does pay off in spades down the line.
And the only other, we're coming up soon to the hour, or close to it, so I don't want to go into a whole other topic, but you are an expert at this, and it's something that has allowed you to really hit the ground running. So I know you're building a course on personal brand, so you don't have to do the whole course, but advice on people, personal branding, how to do that preemptively, like possibly while still in a role, so that if they do want to do something, they can do it like you're doing it right now.
Yeah. So I feel very bullish that every single human that's in business should be like, whether you're in an actual like career, in a full-time role, or you're running your own business, like absolutely, I feel bullish that everyone should be building a personal brand. And the reason is because it's honestly the one thing that you can take with you, whether you are self-employed, employed, coming back to self-employment like me. It goes with you. Like it follows you around. You're building a network. It's yours. It's not your employer's. The body of work you create around your personal brand, like if you're doing some blog posts, let's say, or simply posting on social, any of those things, like those are yours. You own that. And yes, I know it's on a third-party platform in many cases, but you still own the content. Especially if you do end up with like I built a site at erinblaskie.com. I put a lot of stuff there, and that's mine, and I think the thing that has always helped me to both get clients without actually having to market, to find jobs without having to apply for them, it's all been through my network, and it's all been just through the fact that I've built and grown this online. And so like there's easy things that people can do. So you could put up a website like I did at erinblaskie.com. You could throw up a blog there. You could put up some media mentions. You can start to maybe even outline some speaking, topics that you would be able to talk about on a podcast or otherwise. You can use that as sort of your home base, put your portfolio there, whatever, the case might be. And then of course you can leverage social. Like today is so much easier than when I started in 2004. Because we have platforms like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok even. TikTok is obviously a very fast-growing platform. And these all exist. And they're free to use, and they're free to create on. And you can meet so many people. So I would say anyone watching this, like if you're just looking for a few little things to do, the first thing is like kind of come up with like your pillar topics, or sort of like 2 to 3 areas of focus for you. So for me, it's usually marketing, entrepreneurship, and then some like sort of startup kind of ecosystem stuff is usually what I share on. On the more business focused platforms. And then, behind the scenes on Instagram, I'm sharing a lot of like outdoor adventure stuff and, things that I'm doing. But come up with your pillars, and this will give you like a bit of a guiding light to follow. And then from there, just show up consistently on those platforms, like post regularly. It doesn't have to be 5 times a day, but if you're just like showing up consistently, I promise it will grow over time. And then the other thing I'd recommend is like wake up every day and try to connect with at least 5 to 10 new people across those platforms. And this is so simple because it doesn't have to be a big deal. You can just like go on Twitter, search up people that you would like to connect with, and then follow them. There's a good chance they're going to check you out, follow you back, and now you have a connection that you can start to nurture. So there's a lot that can be done, and I just think it's just so important. And again, it's the one thing you can take with you, and it's totally 100% yours and no one else's. And I think that's so critical.
Yeah, no, good advice. Good advice, and you're preaching to the choir. Okay, before we cut off, a couple rapid fire questions,
Sure.
Just about your career, like lessons you've learned. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up? We'll get like the social and stuff at the end, but anything else that you wanted to bring up we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would just say is like, if there's anyone watching or listening to this, watching this that, is sort of feeling stuck at all, don't be afraid to make a change is the only thing I'd say. I've done it so many times. And as long as you trust yourself and you bet on yourself and that no matter what, like you're going to come through for you, I think like, don't be afraid to make the change, just do it.
Good advice. Very good advice. Okay. A myth about entrepreneurship that you want to debunk.
That it's easier than, or like, more freedom, more flexibility. Like those things aren't true. And this isn't like a myth, but I do think it's one of the things I'd like to say that's important is surround yourself with other people, like other entrepreneurs when you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're like a solopreneur, running your own business with if you don't have a team and that kind of thing. Get yourself some people that you can connect with often who also understand what you're going through.
Okay, so that was a perfect segue into the next question. What's a person that's been a mentor or a help to you?
Oh, honestly, like this is a hard question for me to answer because I really do feel I feel like I learned something from everyone, honestly, like I do. And even today, for example, I was having a conversation with someone who was actually, inquiring about my like kind of coaching advisory services. And then we got into this like more deeply psychological conversation about goal setting and like what to do when you don't feel like you have any goals. Anyway, so I think like, if you're willing to be an open person in general and very transparent and authentic with like other people, you can find those mentorship moments everywhere. If you're willing to just like lead with openness, I find if I do that, people are more open in response, and everyone becomes a mentor.
Good. A resource, book or podcast that you'd recommend?
Oh my gosh. Also so many. I would say there's a podcast called Everybody Hates Marketers, I think is what it's called. I don't know. I'm probably butchering the title. Anyway, it's a really great one if you're looking for a tactical marketing podcast that's like actually tactical, walking you through like tactics. Super. I really like that. I just read a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, life changing, and I quit my job immediately after reading that book. So read with caution. And I also think if you're a B2B marketer, Dave Gerhardt's podcast is also incredibly great. It's very, very practical. Yeah.
I Googled it. Everyone Hates Marketers, Learn to Stand the Fuck Out by Louis Grenier.
Yes.
That's what the podcast is called.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's honestly like, I don't love like, I like very tactical marketing podcasts because like they're, you can put them in practice right away. And that one is exactly that.
Cool. Okay. A lesson you tell your younger self.
Don't, I mean, I guess it just goes back to that success thing. Like, don't follow other people's definitions of success. Like, create your own.
And then last question, ask this to everybody. What does success mean to you?
I mean, I think I've already defined it, but really it's
but it's the last question on this list. I got to ask it again. You got to go.
Yeah, I'll do it. So for me, it's literally just like having that financial security, that I don't have to worry about paying my bills. And then I have the time in my life to spend with my daughter and my partner, and that we can do outdoor adventures and just like really absorb life. That's it.
Good.
Yeah.
It's a good answer. I know you already said it.
Yeah,
I ask everybody at the end, and you just preemptively answered it. That's not my fault. Okay. Where do people connect with you online? How do people email you, contact you, socials, all that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. You just have to Google my name. And honestly, I'm at Erin Blaskie just about everywhere. Email address is the same, Erin@erinblaskie.com. And I honestly love getting questions and things by email. So if you're ever like, curious about anything, you've got a question about marketing, it's great inspiration for me for like my YouTube channel, my TikTok, like all of it. So never hesitate to reach out.